My wife was determined to divorce me, simply because a powerful benefactor had helped advance her career. She became convinced that he had fallen for her beauty. And just like that, the bossy wife who constantly ordered me around at home transformed into a love-struck little woman. Her head filled with romantic fantasies about a domineering CEO falling in love with her. Every day, she imagined that as soon as she divorced me, the handsome CEO would sweep her off her feet and marry her. What she didn't know was that the person secretly helping her had never been some company CEO. It was the useless husband she constantly looked down on. Chapter 1. George, I want a divorce. The woman sitting on the sofa had delicate features and an elegant, dignified air. Her light gray skirt suit accentuated her graceful figure. Her hair was neatly tied into a low ponytail, with a few loose strands falling naturally around her face. What did you say? George had just stepped out of the kitchen. Hearing her words, he froze, nearly dropping the casserole dish in his hands. George, I don't want to lie to you anymore, and I don't want to keep lying to myself. Willow seemed to have finally summoned enough courage to look up at her husband, though her hands clasped together unconsciously. George frowned. Wait, you've been lying just fine all this time. Why stop now? He placed the casserole dish on the table. Did something happen at the company today? You know about Stellar Holdings, Willow replied. Without their full support over the past 3 years, Anshin Bio would never have made it this far. Yesterday, they led our Series C funding round with another $1 billion. That's a good thing, George said. So what? He wiped his hands and casually sat down beside his wife. Willow gave him an embarrassed, annoyed shove. Hey, I'm trying to have a serious conversation with you. All you ever do is press yourself against me. Fine, I'll move over. What was wrong with this woman today? If I can't cuddle up to my own wife, who am I supposed to cuddle up to? Willow pointed across the room with one hand. Sit over there. Fine, I'll sit over there. George obediently moved to the sofa opposite her. Please continue with your instructions, CEO Lou. Willow Lou looked helplessly at her foolish husband. She had already made it so obvious. How could he still not understand? Seriously, does he have a teddy bear's brain? Does he really need someone to spell everything out for him? Willow sighed. You've known for a long time that the president of Stellar Holdings is also named George, just like you. George nodded. Of course I know. George Wong, 32 years old, was rumored to be a self-made billionaire who had amassed a fortune of $50 billion while still in his 20s. Yet he remained extraordinarily elusive. Not even half a photograph of him could be found anywhere, making him a deeply mysterious figure. Rumors claimed that George was either hideously ugly or physically disabled, which was why he never appeared in public. Some even said he was merely a frontman for powerful elites. In short, there were all kinds of rumors about him. The problem was, that man was George himself. At 20, he recognized the enormous potential of the mobile internet industry and dropped out of college to start a business. That venture eventually created HandChat, the messaging app now used by people across the country. But back then, his company had nearly collapsed halfway through because he ran out of money. To keep his dream alive, he ventured into something that seemed highly dubious at the time, cryptocurrency. To his surprise, both industries later experienced explosive growth, transforming him from an ordinary young man into a super-rich tycoon almost overnight. Over time, he gradually built the Stellar Empire, whose core businesses included Stellar Technology, Stellar Energy, Stellar Intelligence, and Stellar Investments. Enormous wealth inevitably attracted envy, while endless temptations could easily cloud a person's judgment. That was particularly true for someone like him, whose rise had been meteoric. The more attention he attracted, the sooner someone would try to bring him down. Fortunately, he had a close friend whose family wielded extraordinary influence and had helped him through many difficult situations. Thanks to that connection, and the substantial benefits George had surrendered along the way, he had managed to remain safe until now. Combined with his personality and preferred lifestyle, this had led him to gradually withdraw from public life even before meeting Willow. As for now, he simply wanted to kick back and enjoy his early retirement. Willow continued. Haven't you ever wondered why a man would invest in Anshin Bio again and again? He's invested a total of $3 billion. What could he possibly want? So that was what she meant. It really had been $3 billion, $1 billion each time. The Series A round, in particular, had been an exclusive investment from Stellar Holdings. That funding had saved Anshin Bio when it was on the verge of collapse, along with Willow, who was now sitting across from him. Once the Series C round was completed, Anshin Bio's valuation would soar to $10 billion, making it a genuine unicorn in the synthetic biology industry. George smiled and teased, "Because you're beautiful." Willow nodded. "I knew it." She smiled as well, looking irresistibly alluring. Her eyes brimmed with the smug satisfaction of a woman who believed she understood exactly what men wanted, along with absolute confidence in her own beauty and talent. "No. I was just throwing that out there. Chapter 2. Willow continued. Although George has never shown himself, I understand what he means. He doesn't want to put me in a difficult position, but I can't keep pretending I don't know. You're a man. You understand. This time, Willow was quite satisfied with her husband's judgment and taste. I don't understand a damn thing. What am I supposed to understand? Wait. George suddenly jolted as the implication finally hit him. He rose from the sofa in disbelief and looked down at his wife. So you're planning to dump George, the husband who has stood by you through thick and thin. For George, the president of Stellar Holdings. Faced with his wife's wildly overactive imagination, George didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What the hell was this? Had I somehow cuckolded myself? Willow frowned unhappily. We've been married for 3 years. Don't make it sound so unpleasant. I know you can't bear to lose me. After all, it really will be difficult for you to find another woman like me. But we're just from different worlds now. God damn it. Different worlds, my ass. Hold on. The corner of George's mouth twitched. Willow, let me ask you something. Have you ever met that George? No. Willow shook her head, but her voice became even more certain. The fact that I've never met him makes it even more obvious. If this were purely an investment, he could simply conduct business as usual. But he deliberately refuses to meet me and just keeps quietly pouring money into Anshin Bio. Clearly, he's waiting. George stared at her speechlessly. Waiting for what? George had to admit that he and the woman he had been married to for 3 years truly did not belong in the same world. His wife was clearly an alien. He couldn't understand her at all. Obviously, he's waiting for me to resolve my marital situation, Willow replied. As she spoke, her eyes shone with almost devout conviction. My marriage to you was a mistake, but fortunately, it's not too late to correct it. I may no longer be a young girl, but he probably doesn't care. Otherwise, he wouldn't have continued investing in me. So you think he likes you? George asked. What other explanation could there be? Willow raised her voice slightly and glared at her husband in displeasure. Why did this man never learn? Do you have any idea how powerful Stellar Holdings is? Or what kind of man George is? He's the Grim Reaper of finance. Would a man like him invest in some small company through 3 consecutive funding rounds for no reason? 1 billion each time. And he imposed almost no conditions. Doesn't that make you wonder? Well, damn, apparently, I was the one who hadn't thought this through. What exactly am I supposed to wonder about? George asked. Whether I should step aside and hand you over to him. Willow sighed. I know you don't want to let me go, but Anshin Bio only made it this far because of my hard work, and because he recognized my potential. I can't pretend not to understand his feelings while shamelessly spending his money and continuing to sleep beside you. That's not the kind of person I am. I've always believed in repaying kindness. I did my best throughout our 3-year marriage. I wanted to keep living like this too, but whenever I imagine him watching me all alone, I can't bear it. George, don't you understand? Willow rubbed her forehead in anguish, as though she were facing an impossibly difficult dilemma. George let out a speechless laugh. But what if that George is blind, crippled, or truly hideous? Would you still intend to? Shut up. Willow looked up and interrupted her husband. Do you think I'm such a shallow woman? Do you think I care about his money? No. What matters to me is his unwavering devotion. Even if he were deaf and blind, after everything he has done for me all these years, I, Willow Lu, would gladly accept him. Willow turned away angrily. Talking to you is like talking to a brick wall. What the hell? Now I'm the brick wall. Chapter 3. George truly didn't know what to say. If he accused her of betraying their marriage, she had somehow fallen deeply in love with nothing more than an imaginary figure. If he accused her of being vain and chasing wealth and power, she claimed to treasure the man's 3 years of silent devotion so much that she wouldn't even care if he were disabled. But you've never even met him, George said. Do you know whether he already has a family? Do you know whether he actually wants to be with you? What if he's just playing around? What if he simply values your abilities? Oh, George. Willow sighed. Why are you so clueless? Who would spend 3 billion just to play around? Our love is as steadfast as an oak tree. A shallow man like you would never understand. What the hell? Now she was calling me shallow too. Willow continued. Even if he merely admires my talent. Think about it. I'm a beautiful flower, but there's an unruly shrub growing right beside me, waving its branches everywhere. Would that make a pretty picture? Would he still be in the mood to admire the flower? George's head buzzed. Now I'm a shrub. And apparently, I'm obstructing her beauty too. Besides, I know whether this is love or not. Willow said. The mountains have trees, and trees have branches. My heart delights in you, yet you do not know. Nothing happens without a reason. I've gotten his message. She had gotten the message. All right. She had just gotten it completely wrong. I feel the same way about him. That's why I'm asking you for a divorce. I can't betray him. You have no idea how much pressure I've been under. You don't understand. Willow's eyes reddened. She had actually imagined herself into tears. For fuck's sake. George pinched the space between his eyebrows. So you've chosen to betray me instead? I'm not heartless, but I don't have a choice. Haven't the 3 years I gave you been enough? Willow wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. Besides, do you know why I had to talk to you today? Why? Do you know what Sophia, the president of Stellar Investments, called me yesterday? Willow hadn't intended to mention it. After all, they had been husband and wife for 3 years, but her stubborn husband simply refused to understand. What did she call you? She slipped up and called me the boss's wife. Do you understand what that means? And every time Sophia speaks to me, she's extremely respectful. Anyone with eyes can see what's going on. I'm not stupid. No, you're not stupid. You've just completely checkmated me. That was the most terrifying thing about someone with an overactive imagination. It wasn't that Willow had no brains. Her brain worked far too well. She could connect every detail together and somehow turn a ridiculous theory into the absolute truth. Willow, have you ever considered another possibility? What possibility? George asked. Has it ever occurred to you that I might be that George? The dining room fell silent for about 3 seconds. Willow stared at him, her gaze slowly traveling from his head to his feet. He was 6'1", with a lean build, sharply defined features, slightly long hair, and simple yet tasteful clothes. He did possess a somewhat melancholy, artistic air. Her husband was undeniably handsome and presentable. That was one of the reasons she had willingly stayed with him for 3 years. But upon closer inspection, he was wearing a gray apron over his loungewear. A small spot of sauce stained his sleeve, and an unknown brand of slippers covered his feet. His hair was damp from sweating over the stove and lay limply against his forehead. Willow laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the perfunctory kind of laugh that said, "You've got to be kidding me." Chapter 4. Willow held her forehead. Oh, give me a break. I think you're suffering from delusions. George was speechless. Lady, which one of us is actually delusional here? Willow turned to face him, her expression becoming more serious, as though she were discussing a matter of national importance. George, you've said that several times before. Although you share the same name, the two of you belong to completely different worlds. That George can casually throw around billions. You haggle over the price of a sea base. He stands at the very top, moving markets and pulling strings, while you stay home and cook. It can't be helped. That's fate. I know you're unwilling to accept reality, so you indulge in these ridiculous fantasies. Since we're husband and wife, I won't laugh at you. But don't say things like that again. You might get yourself into trouble. I'm only saying this for your own good. What the hell? George awkwardly wiped his hands on his apron. Had she really just lectured him? And claimed it was for his own good? Willow shook her head. I know you can't accept our divorce, but there's nothing we can do. In this life, I can only let you down. George, perhaps in our next life, we could. I agree to the divorce. George interrupted. Of course, he had countless ways to prove that he was that George, but right now, he felt there was no point in saying anything more. Willow had already committed emotional infidelity. The object of her affection just happened to be an imaginary version of him. George, the president of Stellar Group, he had always thought their past 3 years together had been wonderful. His wife was elegant in public and passionate in bed. He had joked before that he was George, but he had never seriously explained his identity. He simply hadn't thought it was necessary. What a marriage needed was not a powerful CEO, but a dependable, down-to-earth man. Besides, Willow had never shown any signs of having such thoughts before. He had to admit, she had hidden them extremely well, right up until today, when she dropped this enormous bombshell and completely stunned him. If he revealed his identity, he didn't know whether his wife would be able to accept it. But one thing was certain, he couldn't accept her emotional betrayal. Willow froze. You agree? Yes. George's eyes were as still as stagnant water as he nodded. There's already someone else in your heart. There's no point in forcing you to stay. Willow opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but ultimately remained silent. Instead, she stood up and embraced her husband. George, I'm sorry. Please don't blame me. Her tears fell onto George's shoulder, and her voice choked with emotion. Damn it, don't do this. Now I can't even bring myself to curse at you. I'll leave this apartment to you. Willow said. You can keep one of the cars, and we'll split our savings equally. Once we're no longer together, find yourself a woman who genuinely treats you well. Don't just focus on whether she's beautiful. You're not young anymore. You don't have the energy to keep starting over. Find someone who truly loves you and can take care of you. Willow wiped away her tears. With reddened eyes, she smoothed the wrinkles from her husband's clothes, then carefully studied his face. George was completely numb. Who the hell got divorced like this? Are you leaving later? George asked. Willow always finish what I start. I'm still your wife today. Willow reached up and held his face between her hands. I'll have a proper dinner with you. And tonight. Willow lowered her head, her cheeks turning slightly red. George stared at her speechlessly. What about tonight? Willow pressed her lips together. I know you've always craved my body and can never get enough. It'll be difficult for you to find another woman like me in the future. So tonight, I'll let you have your way with me all night. Tomorrow, we'll go to the civil affairs office and finalize the divorce. This was beyond absurd. How considerate of her. George took a deep breath. Wait, what kind of way is that to talk to me? Who are you looking down on? What do you mean it'll be difficult to find another woman like you? Let me tell you. Willow interrupted him. All right. I know you're just trying to protect your pride. Sit down and eat. This is our last meal together. So let's have a proper conversation as husband and wife. Perhaps because George had agreed to the divorce, Willow seemed much more relaxed. At the same time, she also appeared increasingly reluctant to part with him. Eat, my ass. You delusional woman. And somehow, she was still being loving and considerate about it. How the hell was any of this supposed to make sense? Chapter 5. It was already late morning by the time George and Willow finally came downstairs and left the building. One was clutching his lower back, while the other could barely walk properly. Willow, what happened to you? Freya, who had been waiting downstairs, hurried over to support Willow and looked her up and down. Freya was 28 years old, Willow's best friend, and a university psychology professor. Unlike the outwardly gentle and dignified Willow, Freya possessed a face alluring enough to captivate anyone. Her exquisitely defined features, tall and stunning figure, outgoing yet fierce personality, and sharp, effortlessly stylish outfit combined to create an aura that warned strangers to stay at least 15 feet away. Simply put, she was the kind of beauty who could make even a blind man swallow hard, but whom ordinary people wouldn't dare approach. With dark circles beneath her eyes, Willow glared angrily at her husband. It's all his fault. He was like a bull and just wouldn't stop. Freya froze in confusion, then turned to look at George, who was standing beside them with one hand pressed against his lower back. Although she was still unmarried, she was a psychology professor. How could she possibly fail to understand what had happened? Freya's eyes widened. And you two are still getting divorced after that? Good Lord. Even with all her psychology training, she had never encountered anything like this. Willow angrily pinched her. Why are you shouting so loudly? Hurry up and help me into the car. Who's shouting? From the looks of you, you were the one doing plenty of shouting last night. As Freya helped Willow into the car, she looked over at George. You really didn't go easy on her, did you? The corner of George's mouth twitched. She's already going to cheat on me. Am I not allowed to get some crazy revenge? After helping Willow into her seat, Freya looked at George over the roof of the car and laughed. George, are you sure you're up to the task? Maybe you should change your name to Stand Still. Whether I'm up to the task or not, why don't you come over and find out for yourself, Professor Freya? Annoyed, George climbed into the car and slammed the door. You think I was the one begging for it? Your best friend was the one who couldn't get enough. George, you really do have a filthy mouth. Freya snapped. Is running your mouth the only exercise you get from staying home all day? No wonder Willow wants to divorce you. She opened the driver's door and got behind the wheel. Have you two seriously thought this through? Freya turned to look at the two people sitting in the back. You've been together for 3 years. Are you really going to end it just like that? George turned to look out the window. Don't ask me. Ask your best friend. I'm not the one asking for a divorce. The whole thing was so absurd that he couldn't even explain it. I've made up my mind, Willow replied. She smiled at Freya, then casually reached over and held George's hand. George jolted. There's no need to do this anymore, is there? George, I always finish what I start. I won't be able to accompany you anymore after today, so let's treat this as our final journey together. What the hell? Just listen to her. George looked at the equally bewildered Freya. Professor Freya, didn't you study psychology? Aren't you going to examine her? Well, Freya ran a hand through her chestnut brown waves. How the hell should I know? I've never seen a couple like you two before. You both need to calm down, Freya said, making one final attempt to persuade them. Willow, you've been under too much pressure lately, and it's giving you tunnel vision. George treats you so well. Where else are you going to find a man like him? What good is that? Willow replied coldly. Freya, you don't understand. You're right, I don't, Freya said. All I know is that you're pushing this man away for someone you've never even met. Have you completely lost your mind? I haven't lost my mind. Willow took a deep breath. Freya, George from Stellar Holdings has invested in 4 consecutive funding rounds for me. 4. If he didn't have feelings for me, why wouldn't he invest in someone else? Why is his team always the first to step in whenever I encounter difficulties? Don't give me some explanation about business logic. Business logic can't explain $3 billion's worth of favoritism. Chapter 6. Freya opened her mouth to argue, but for a moment, she didn't know what to say. She studied psychology, so she understood Willow's current mental state all too well. This was a classic case of cognitive closure. When faced with uncertainty, people instinctively searched for the simplest explanation to eliminate their anxiety. And, the owner of Stellar Holdings is in love with me, was the easiest answer available. Willow, have you considered that things might not be what you imagine? Freya asked. Then what are they? Willow countered. Tell me, why would a tycoon worth 50 billion care so much about a small company worth only 5 billion? What explanation is there besides love? Freya fell silent. She couldn't make sense of it either. After all, she was no longer young and naive. Capital always pursued profit. No one would invest 3 billion in someone merely because she was beautiful. Which of today's capitalists wasn't a ruthless predator? The support Stellar Holdings had given Unseen Bio Group had gone far beyond ordinary business logic. Freya subconsciously glanced at George. He sat quietly in the back seat, his expression as calm as though he were waiting for a train to arrive. He didn't argue, beg Willow to stay, or even say another word. An indescribable feeling suddenly rose in Freya's heart. She had known George for 3 years. Throughout that time, she had watched him devote himself to Willow and tolerate every bit of her bad temper. Countless times, Freya had told Willow that she must have saved the entire galaxy in her previous life to deserve a man like him, but Willow had never listened. Now they were actually getting divorced. Such a wonderful man was about to become available. Good heavens, Freya, what are you thinking? She quickly turned around and started the car. The Porsche Panamera pulled away, but her heart refused to stop racing. Half an hour later, they arrived at the Civil Affairs office. The divorce proceedings were completed quickly. Willow's hand didn't tremble once as she signed the papers. Freya, however, stood beside her with reddened eyes. Willow, are you really giving him up? Willow slipped the divorce certificate into her bag and replied expressionlessly, we already discussed it. Even if we're no longer husband and wife, we can still be friends. George put his own divorce certificate into his pocket. I'm not interested in that. Willow glanced at her childish ex-husband. George, there's no need to say such spiteful things. If you ever encounter difficulties in the future, I might still be able to help you. I won't need it. Why do you have to be so stubborn? Freya snapped. Can't you say something nice and ask her to stay? We already have our divorce certificates. George replied. Would a few sweet words really change her mind? I nearly destroyed my back last night, and even that didn't make any difference. Oh, shut up. That's only because you weren't good enough. Freya blurted out. Hey, what kind of thing was that to say? Willow patted Freya's hand. Freya, don't criticize him. This isn't his fault. I'm the one who has chosen someone else. Freya frowned. Can you really bear to let him go? This guy is pretty handsome. You know, if another woman takes a liking to him, you won't get another chance even if you regret this later. Then I would sincerely thank her. At least I wouldn't have to worry about George anymore. He would have someone to look after him. You're awfully generous. Freya replied. Be careful, or I might steal him from you. Her gaze wandered, and a faint blush appeared on her face. Willow gave a soft snort. Come to think of it, you're not getting any younger either. If you're willing to take him, I'd be delighted. Then I wouldn't have to keep worrying about whether he was doing well. George stared at them speechlessly. I'm a living, breathing person standing right here. And Willow, do you have any conscience at all? Someone to look after me? Which one of us was always looking after the other? Chapter 7. Willow looked at him aggrievedly. Wasn't I just busy? At a time like this, do you really have to argue over who did more for whom? Right. So apparently, I was the one in the wrong again. We're already divorced. Stay out of my business. George, are you still angry with me? Willow was on the verge of tears. She had thought that after being so honest with him, and giving him everything she had last night, her husband would at least remember some of her good qualities. Who would have thought that he wouldn't even want to speak to her now? Freya glared at George. Honestly, what's wrong with you? You're acting as if anyone even wants to bother with you. Good. That suits me perfectly. Do you want me to give you a ride? George shook his head. No. Take her home. I'll walk around for a while. Freya immediately warned him. George, I'm telling you now, you'd better not do anything stupid just to scare us. George, you absolutely mustn't. Willow was startled by Freya's words. No wonder her husband had been in such a foul mood today. George waved dismissively. Do you really think I'm that pathetic? Just hurry up and leave. Well, go. Hurry up. If you don't leave now, I'll drag you back inside and register our remarriage. Oh, no, you can't do that. Willow jumped in fright. Hubby, I'm leaving now. Please don't do anything drastic. She walked away slowly, looking back at him with every step. Her husband clearly loved her far too deeply. He was even secretly harboring thoughts of remarrying her. But she truly couldn't turn back now. As Willow dragged Freya away, Freya couldn't help glancing back at George. The men stood where they had left him, silhouetted against the light. His shadow stretched long across the ground, and amid the crowd flowing around him, he looked extraordinarily lonely. Freya suddenly felt her nose sting with emotion. Chapter 8. That afternoon, At Stellar Holdings headquarters, George leaned back in his executive chair and looked at his trusted subordinate, Sophia Kim, the president of Stellar Investments. You've done an excellent job lately. Where is this sudden praise coming from, boss? Sophia, who was sitting across from him, widened her eyes. Did the boss's wife put in a good word for me? I got divorced, George said through gritted teeth. Sophia jolted to her feet. Seriously, but we just invested another $1 billion in Anshin Bio the day before yesterday. Exactly, and thanks to you, she fell in love with George, the owner of Stellar Holdings. George spun a pen between his fingers, amused by the sheer absurdity of it all. What? Sophia's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. But that's still you. Why would she divorce you? I think it may be time to reconsider whether you're qualified for your current position. Oh, come on, boss. You can't do that to me. Sophia instantly put on an aggrieved expression, swaying her graceful figure. I've followed you since the day I graduated. If you tell me to go east, I wouldn't dare go west. The only thing I haven't done is warm your bed. If you don't mind, I could. George gave her a thumbs up. The Oscar is definitely yours this year. Really? Sophia asked excitedly. George stared at her speechlessly. Sophia cleared her throat. I mean, did the boss's wife really divorce you? George irritably tossed his freshly issued divorce certificate onto the desk. Does this look fake to you? No. This doesn't make sense. How could she lose her mind like this? Sophia opened the certificate and was genuinely dumbfounded. Her usually unserious boss wasn't joking this time. George rubbed his temples. This is all your fault. You called her the boss's wife once, and that was enough to send her imagination completely out of control. She became convinced that George from Stellar Holdings had feelings for her and insisted on divorcing me. Tell me this isn't ridiculous. Ha ha ha. Ah. Sophia was laughing happily until she caught George's knife-sharp glare. Her voice immediately became cautious. Couldn't you have just explained everything to her? Does that brain of yours actually work? Do you really think this is something an explanation can fix? Why not? Let me give you an example. Suppose you have a private burner account your husband doesn't know about. I don't have a husband. I only have my boss. Sophia interrupted. Shut up. It's just an example. Let's say your husband gets along extremely well with you through that alternate account, but he doesn't know it belongs to you. Then he falls in love with the online version of you and insists on divorcing the real you. He wouldn't dare. Sophia angrily slammed the divorce certificate onto the desk. George nodded. Exactly. This isn't something an explanation can solve. She has already emotionally cheated on me. You're right, boss. You absolutely had to divorce her. Sophia leaned forward, braced both hands against the desk, and cupped her face, fluttering her large eyes at him. She asked, So, do you think I could take her place? Not a chance. George pulled out a cigarette. Boss, take a good look at me. I have a beautiful face and a great body. Most importantly, I feel incredible to the touch. If you don't believe me, try it. Unconvinced, Sophia reached out to grab his hand. Cough, cough. George sprayed out a mouthful of smoke and nearly choked to death. Why were all the women he knew such temptresses? Knock, knock, knock. A crisp knock sounded at the door. George breathed a sigh of relief. He had nearly fallen victim to that demoness Sophia. Come in, Sophia Kim said coldly. She sat back in her chair and instantly regained the dignified air of an aloof executive. No one would have guessed that moments earlier. She had been pouting and acting cute. The secretary who entered wore a conflicted expression. Boss, MS Kim. Well, speak. There's a woman named Willow downstairs who wants to meet the boss. I told her you weren't here, but she insisted on giving you a letter. She said that once you read it, you would definitely agree to see her. Sophia laughed in exasperation. That Willow. She certainly moves fast. George said, Bring it here. Let me see what she wrote. You're actually going to read it? Sophia demanded. Why wouldn't I? She poured her heart into this. George accepted the letter. That's enough, Sophia said coldly. Tell her we'll notify her when we receive news about the boss. Ask her to go home for now. Understood. As the secretary turned around, she curled her lips suspiciously. There was definitely something going on between Sophia and the boss. Why else would Sophia receive such special treatment? Shutting herself in his office with him every time she arrived, doing who knew what. Chapter 9. George had already opened the letter. Well, would you look at that? A whole page filled from top to bottom. George could even detect the faint fragrance of sandalwood blended with orris root lingering on the paper. Rich and elegant. Had she even changed her perfume? Let's see what kind of nonsense you've written. One glance nearly made George die of rage. What a hopelessly lovesick woman. George, may these words find you as though I stood before you. First, please permit me to address you so intimately. Willow has always understood the affection you bear her. Alas, I am nearing 30. Already another man's wife, a faded and fallen blossom. I dared not indulge in such hopes, and yet, your kindness has flowed over me like mighty rivers. vast and unending. Even had Willow's heart been carved from unyielding stone, it would long since have melted into a tenderness supple enough to wind around your finger. Many a time have I lamented the cruel mistake fate led me to make in this mortal world. For 3 years, you have stood by me without grievance or regret and never once reproached me. Gazing upon my reflection, Willow has spent countless nights without sleep. At last, I have resolved to sever the ill-fated bond of my past and honor the vow that binds us across 3 lifetimes. Willow knows well that her beauty is as frail as the willow and that her body, already sullied, is unworthy of standing beside you. I ask only that we meet, so I may lay bare my heart before you. I long to remain at your side by day and night, to share your burdens and bring solace to your heart. Should I be blessed with your tenderness, no greater joy could be mine. Yours in ardent longing. Willow, a vow across 3 lifetimes, a sullied body, a cruel mistake in this mortal world. George slammed the letter down on the table in fury. Oh, Willow, you've really outdone yourself. Sophia leaned closer. Let me have a look. What are you looking at? Coming back to his senses, George reached for the letter, only to find that Sophia had already snatched it away. What's wrong with me reading it? You two are already divorced. Sophia rose from her chair, dodging him as she continued reading. Has this Willow woman lost her mind? Remain at your side by day and night. Bring solace to your heart. Wow, is she really that good at it? George snapped irritably. Not as good as you. So you do know, boss. Sophia laughed as she held the letter between her fingers. I'll admit, though, I don't possess your ex-wife's extraordinary literary talent. What literary talent? It's disgusting. I never realized I had become a stain on her life. Should I be fortunate enough to receive your affection, no greater blessing could exist. She's completely thrown away her dignity. Ha ha ha, boss. Sophia laughed so hard that her entire body shook. You have to admit, your charm is incredible. Unfortunately, Willow failed to recognize the treasure right in front of her. She invented an entire romance in her head and abandoned the men who truly loved her. Keep laughing. I dare you. I'm not laughing. Sophia pressed her lips tightly together, desperately trying to suppress her smile. Don't worry, boss. She's only one woman. Worst case, I can. Shut up. That's not what I meant. Sophia hurriedly changed direction. I meant you can rest assured, Willow clearly needs to be taught a lesson. Give me 3 days, and I'll bankrupt Anshin Bio so you can make a grand reveal and rub the truth in her face. George stared at her speechlessly. You really need to stop reading those brain-dead web novels. His head buzzed. What kind of people had he hired? Then what do you plan to do? Sophia asked. Don't tell me you still haven't gotten over her. Whether or not that men would actually accept her. This is definitely emotional cheating. Just look at what she wrote. My God, I can barely stand to read it. You can barely stand to read it. George sneered. Your eyes are practically glued to the page. Sophia looked up. I'm analyzing it so I can develop a strategy. Seriously, boss. How do you intend to respond? I'm a businessman. Why would I turn away an opportunity to make money? George continued. Tell her in a few days that meeting me isn't entirely impossible. I'll give her 2 years. If she can raise the company's valuation to 20 billion, I'll give her a chance. Damn. Sophia's eyes widened before she hurriedly gave him a thumbs up. No wonder you're our boss. Brilliant. Not only have you given Willow a goal, but if she fails, she'll be too embarrassed to bother you again. And to achieve it, she'll have to work herself to death. More importantly, you won't even pass up the opportunity to exploit your ex-wife. You're truly the model capitalist. Ebenezer Scrooge himself would weep before you. Do you no longer want your stock options? Oh, we're talking about my stock options now. Sophia leaned across the desk. The curves beneath the collar of her blouse were faintly visible, while her alluring eyes seemed capable of stealing a man's soul. If you let me warm your bed, I'd even work without a salary. George waved his phone. Excellent. I recorded that. We can put the matter to a show of hands vote at the next board meeting. Sophia's entire body went rigid. What kind of bastard boss was this? Boss, you can't do that. Sophia lunged forward to snatch his phone, looking pitifully aggrieved. I know I was wrong. Please let me off just this once. Okay. Chapter 10. George didn't return to the villa until that evening. He paused at the entrance. Why were the lights still on? Had Willow not moved out yet? Or was she planning to give him another passionate farewell? But the moment George remembered that sickeningly sentimental letter from earlier, every trace of interest disappeared. That idiotic woman. George opened the front door and walked inside as quietly as possible. The house felt much emptier, but a chaotic clattering came from the kitchen. What the hell? Who was in there? It certainly couldn't be Willow. She rarely entered the kitchen even before the divorce, let alone now that her only goal was to throw herself at the other version of him. George changed his shoes, walked to the kitchen doorway, and leaned against the frame to watch for a moment. Good grief, what a temptress. Her chestnut brown waves had been casually pinned behind her head with a single chopstick, revealing the slender, pale curve of her neck. The straps of her apron were tied in a loose bow around her waist. Beneath it, she wore light gray denim shorts that revealed a pair of long, straight legs, pale, toned, and smooth. Bent over slightly, she supported herself against the counter with her left hand while holding a small porcelain spoon in her right. She scooped a little soup from the casserole dish, brought it to her lips, and gently blew on it twice, preparing to taste the seasoning. It was Freya. George hadn't expected this woman to have such a gentle, domestic side. Wait, that wasn't important. The important question was, why was she in his house? After watching her for several seconds, George spoke. Professor Freya? Ah. Freya jolted violently. The spoon trembled in her hand, spilling soup over the back of it. Several drops also splashed onto her bare thigh. Hiss. Freya sucked in a sharp breath. Hey, be careful. George hadn't expected the timing to be so unfortunate. Of all the moments she could have chosen to taste the soup, why did it have to be the exact second he spoke? George, what the hell is wrong with you? Are you coming home or sneaking in to rob the place? You didn't make a single sound. Freya's eyes reddened. She hurriedly dropped the spoon and cradled her hand, blowing on it. Wait, how was this suddenly my fault? Blowing on it won't help. You need cold water. George grabbed her wrist, pulled her hand beneath the faucet, and turned on the cold water. Freya's face instantly turned bright red. Was this bastard taking advantage of the situation to touch her? Cold water rushed over the back of her hand. The spots scalded by the hot soup had already turned faintly red. Anywhere else? George asked. My leg too. Freya lowered her gaze toward her thigh. Several drops of soup had left pale red marks on her fair skin. What rotten luck. Why did I have to wear shorts today? George followed her gaze, then noticed several more spots on her knee and lower leg. Stay still and keep your hand under the water. He turned around, grabbed a clean, soft towel, soaked it in cold water, wrung it out, and crouched down. He started with the droplets on her thigh. The towel gently pressed against her skin, making the muscles along the side of Freya's leg tense slightly. The cold seeped into her skin, soothing the lingering burn. George supported the outside of her knee with one hand while gently wiping her thigh with the towel in the other. He then moved down to treat the spots on her knee and ankle. By the time Freya realized what was happening, she was completely dumbfounded. George, what are you doing? George looked up. Wiping your leg. Didn't you get burned? But you can't just touch me without asking. Freya was nearly in tears. How could this man have no sense of boundaries whatsoever? George froze for a moment. Professor Freya teaches psychology, which technically makes you a healthcare professional. Why are you being so fussy? Right now, I'm simply a burn specialist. Burn specialist? My ass. George sighed. Besides, you're practically 30. Why are you acting like some innocent young girl? So what if I touched you? It's not as if you can get pregnant from it. Stop being so dramatic. You. Freya was too furious to form a complete sentence. What about me? George stood up and shoved the wet towel into her hands. I haven't even asked you yet. Why are you in my house? Humph. Freya had been on the verge of exploding, but she immediately became evasive. Her gaze drifted toward the casserole dish. Willow was worried about you, so she asked me to come and see whether you were still alive. George scoffed. Is she really that kind-hearted? The only reason nothing had happened was that the other man was also George himself. If another George from Stellar Holdings truly existed, George had no doubt that Willow would already be in that man's bed. That was precisely why he refused to forgive her, or explain the truth. Chapter 11. Freya gathered her courage, lifted her chin, and said, no good deed goes unpunished. I'm extremely busy, you know. If Willow hadn't been afraid you might do something drastic, I wouldn't have bothered coming. Then I truly must thank the distinguished Professor Freya. George leaned over to peer into the casserole dish. I never knew Professor Freya could be both elegant in public and capable in the kitchen. Impressive. Of course, I spent 3 hours simmering this soup. Did Willow tell you to make the soup too? Freya choked for a moment before stubbornly replying. Do you think I wanted to make soup for you? Dream on. Hurry up and move aside. She shoved George away, hiding her flushed face in the rising steam. What kind of soup is this? Why does it look like such a mess? It is not a mess. Don't make ignorant comments when you know nothing about it. This is seahorse and morinda root soup. George's eyes widened. What? Professor Freya, you made a virility tonic for a man who just got divorced. What exactly are you trying to do? It's just supposed to nourish your body. Nourish me? My ass. You're more likely to kill me. This is an aphrodisiac tonic, Professor Freya. Freya's face instantly turned crimson. The heat spread from the tips of her ears all the way down her neck. That bastard really was an experienced house husband. How did he even know that? The supermarket owner said it boosts male vitality, energy, and blood health. He said it was especially good for men. You could barely walk this morning. So I thought. So you thought what? George smiled. Freya's entire face felt as though it had caught fire. Good Lord. What kind of nonsense was she saying? Willow told me to do it. How would I know any of that? Freya stubbornly shifted all the blame onto Willow. Forget it. Don't drink it. Just pour it away. Why would I pour it away and waste perfectly good ingredients? Let me try it. George used a ladle to fill a bowl, then took a small sip. Freya's eyes filled with anticipation. How does it taste? Pretty good. I never knew Professor Freya had such hidden talents. Would you like a bowl? No way. Suit yourself. George carried the bowl out of the kitchen. George, you really do have an awful mouth. You were as meek as a mouse around Willow, but all you know how to do is act tough in front of me. Huh? Where did he go? When Freya walked out, George had disappeared. Only the bowl of soup remained on the dining table. That bastard. Fine. Don't drink it. No, I need to leave quickly. Where are you going, Professor Freya? George casually came downstairs, waving a tube of ointment in his hand. Come here and put some medicine on those burns. Freya had just picked up her bag from the sofa. She replied awkwardly, that won't be necessary, will it? What do you mean it won't be necessary? Don't blame me if those burns leave scars. What? Freya immediately became frightened. She cared more about her figure and skin than anything else. Surely a few drops of soup wouldn't leave scars, would they? But she couldn't be certain. Sit down and stretch out your leg. Freya angrily snatched the ointment from his hand. Get lost. Are you ever going to stop taking advantage of me? As if I'm interested. George picked up his bowl of soup, sat down on the sofa, and began drinking while Freya stretched out her long legs and applied the ointment. Freya glared at him. Can't you drink that at the dining table? What's wrong with looking? George gave her legs an appreciative glance. Professor Freya dressed so beautifully today. If I didn't show some appreciation, wouldn't that make me insensitive to your charms? Chapter 12. What kind of nonsense was this bastard saying? George, are you finally showing your true colors? You barely dared to speak to me before. George leaned closer as he replied. Professor Freya, please choose your words carefully. It wasn't that I didn't dare. I simply thought it would be inappropriate. But now, I'm single. What are you trying to do? Freya jumped in fright and said with a trembling voice. George, I'm warning you. Don't try anything. TCH. George reached past Freya, picked up his pack of cigarettes, pulled one out, and lit it. Freya studied the men through the smoke. Are you really all right? I'm serious. Don't dismiss this. The human mind is extremely complicated. Sometimes, you may not even realize what you're feeling. Freya had finally remembered that she was a psychology professor. George exhaled a stream of smoke. It drifted lazily upward and dispersed beneath the lights. Is Professor Freya's occupational habit acting up again? I'm not joking. Freya screwed the cap back onto the ointment, lowered her leg, and adopted a serious expression. When someone suddenly experiences a major life change, they may appear perfectly fine on the surface, but that's often when problems are most likely to develop. Some people don't process their divorce until 6 months later. By then, they're already depressed. George waved dismissively. I only got divorced. I didn't lose a limb. Stop joking around. Freya frowned. For 3 years, your entire life revolved around one person. She was the center of everything you did. Now she has suddenly disappeared from your life. Don't you feel empty? George's hand paused, the cigarette still between his fingers. As Freya watched him through the smoke, his eyes seemed lost and lonely. Her heart suddenly tightened. She had prepared an entire lecture filled with psychological concepts such as cognitive restructuring, social support systems, and healthy emotional release. Yet now, she couldn't say a single word, but she was certain of one thing. Although this man was always flippant and rarely sounded serious, he had genuinely loved someone for the past 3 years. Unfortunately, that person had abandoned him. A phone rang, breaking the strange silence in the room. Who could that be? Freya pulled her phone from her bag. When she saw the caller's name, she froze. Willow. Well, Freya wished she could disappear on the spot. George smiled in amusement. Answer it, my ass. Freya was furious. Forget it. She would stop worrying about this insufferable man. Freya put on a charming smile and answered the call. Hello, Willow. Yes, I'm already home. I was just about to take a shower. What? George's eyes widened. Freya immediately shot him a glare sharp enough to stab him. George hurriedly mimed zipping his lips shut, nearly making Freya burst out laughing. Yes, he wasn't there. Freya continued. I left it on the coffee table and went home. As she spoke, Freya picked up a bank card from the corner of the coffee table and pushed it toward George. What was this? George stared at the card in confusion. Freya suddenly widened her eyes. What? You actually met CEO Wang? At that moment, Willow was still in the president's office at Anshin Bio. Although she looked exhausted, her eyes shone with excitement. No, I didn't meet him, Willow replied. But George sent me a message. He said that if I can raise the company's valuation to $20 billion within 2 years, He'll agree to meet me. Willow, what are you talking about? That sounds extremely suspicious. If you didn't meet him, who delivered the message? Sophia, the president of Stellar Investments. I just got off the phone with her. She said George was delighted to hear that I had divorced, but that it still wasn't time for us to meet. The corner of George's mouth twitched. Why does this sound like a scam? Freya asked. Willow gave a cold snort. What scam? He has already invested $3 billion. What kind of scammer would be that generous? He hasn't imposed any conditions. So what could he possibly scam me out of? Chapter 13. Freya had nothing left to say. That was the strangest part of this entire situation. Freya, even though we haven't met yet, our hearts are already together. I feel full of energy now. I believe he and I will definitely meet at the top. Willow even clenched her fist to encourage herself. Freya helplessly held her forehead. Willow, are you still at the office? You've truly lost your mind. This isn't something that needs to be accomplished overnight. Freya, you don't understand. I can't betray his expectations of me. This is also the test he has set for me. If I fail, how could I face him? How could I possibly deserve to stand beside him? Freya felt an enormous headache coming on. Willow, haven't you become a little too obsessed? Neither one of this former couple ever gave her a moment's peace. Freya, I know what I'm doing. You should get some rest. Willow ended the call. Freya put down her phone and irritably pushed George away. Why are you standing so close to me? I just wanted to hear what she was saying. She didn't mention you. I know. The room fell into a strange silence. Oh, right. Willow asked me to give you that card. She transferred everything you're entitled to into it. Keep it somewhere safe. George rubbed his head without saying anything. None of that money held any significance for him. Does it hurt? Freya asked softly. No. You men are always too stubborn to admit how you feel. George suddenly turned toward her. By the way, didn't you say you were going to take a shower? When are you doing that? Want me to join you? Shower by yourself, you pervert. Freya's face instantly flushed again. She grabbed her bag, smacked George with it, and hurried toward the door. It wasn't until she had hastily put on her shoes, stepped outside, and felt the cool breeze against her face that she realized she had fallen for that bastard's trick. He had deliberately said that to make her leave. That asshole. And perhaps it was only her imagination. But why did she keep feeling that there was more to George than being a mere house husband? He didn't care about money. In his eyes, that bank card seemed no more valuable than a scrap of paper. More importantly, there was something about the way he spoke and handled matters, not to mention his calm, composed bearing. Could he really be nothing more than a house husband? Good heavens. Freya, have you lost your mind? What kind of ridiculous story are you inventing now? Forget it. I'm leaving. Do you think I care about you? You insufferable man. Inside the villa, George lay sprawled across the sofa and slowly exhaled. His mind felt completely empty. Suddenly, he had no idea what to do with himself. The following day, George didn't wake until late morning. After getting up, he did nothing. He simply sat on the bed and stared blankly out the window. He didn't hate Willow, nor did he resent her. That was simply how adult relationships worked. You never knew how far two people would walk together. Sometimes, without even realizing it, they simply drifted apart. But Freya had been right. For the past 3 years, George's entire life had revolved around Willow. She had been the warmth and familiarity of his ordinary domestic life. Now that she was gone, everything suddenly felt empty. By the time the doorbell rang, 4 or 5 cigarette butts had already accumulated in the ashtray on his bedside table. George sighed, pushed himself off the bed, and shuffled to the front door in his slippers. When he opened it, Freya was standing outside. Her chestnut curls had been tied into a low ponytail. She wore a white dress whose hem ended a hand's width above her knees, revealing her straight, slender calves. A pair of light-colored ballet flats covered her feet. Her toenails were painted a subtle nude shade that gleamed faintly beneath the afternoon sunlight. Chapter 14. George froze for a moment. This woman was so beautiful that she was almost dazzling. What are you staring at? Freya glared at him. Move aside. George stepped aside to let her in, then closed the door behind her. Professor Freya, no shorts today. Freya rolled her eyes. I was afraid a certain someone might take advantage of the opportunity to grope me again. She placed an insulated bag on the dining table, opened it, and took out 2 thermal food containers. Chicken soup. I soaked the chicken overnight and simmered it all morning. I already tasted it, and it's pretty good. George stood beside the table and watched her remove the contents one by one. Chicken soup, a plate of chilled okra salad, a small container of sliced fruit, and finally a pair of chopsticks and a spoon. She arranged everything neatly on the table. You don't get the wrong idea. Freya unscrewed the lid, and the aroma of chicken soup immediately filled the room. I was afraid you might starve yourself to death, and then Willow would blame me. George laughed. She's busy dreaming about meeting another man at the top. When would she have time to blame you? TCH. Men suffering from heartbreak really are pitiful. Freya's hands paused briefly. She pushed the chopsticks toward him. Just eat and stop saying pointless things. George sat down, picked up a piece of okra with his chopsticks, and put it into his mouth. Then he took a sip of soup. The chicken had been simmered until tender. While the broth was clear and rich, the ginger had been sliced into delicate strips, and the soup left a comforting warmth in his throat. It's delicious, he said. Freya sat across from him with her legs together and angled to one side, resting her elbows on the table. She placed her chin on the backs of her folded hands and watched him eat. Her stare made George uncomfortable. Aren't you eating? I already ate at home. Then why are you sitting there? To watch you eat. Freya answered as though it were perfectly reasonable. I'm a psychology professor. Observing how food affects people's emotions is one of my research subjects. Professor Freya. George put down his chopsticks. Did you come here to bring me food or psychoanalyze me? Both. Freya smiled. Her expression had lost some of its usual sharpness and gained a touch of gentleness. Keep eating. I won't say anything else. George picked up his chopsticks again and lowered his head to drink the soup. After taking 2 more sips, he asked, So, what has your analysis revealed? Freya stood, walked around the table, and sat in the chair beside him, bringing herself noticeably closer. George, she said softly, if you're hurting, you can cry. I promise I won't laugh at you. George stared at her for several seconds before laughing. Professor Freya, I'm not sad. Why would I cry? You're not sad? Freya blinked. No, George replied. Like you said, I just feel empty for the moment. I don't know what to do with myself. Freya thought for a moment. Then why don't you find something to do? You only feel empty because you have too much free time. George's eyes lit up. Great. How about letting me look at your legs? Freya froze, then angrily punched him. George, I used to think you were a perfect gentleman. I never imagined you were this kind of man. What kind of man am I? You told me to find something to do. Shouldn't I choose something exciting? That's the only way to pull myself out of my grief. Dream on, you pervert. A faint blush appeared on Freya's face. Fine, I won't look. Freya suddenly slapped the table. I've got it. I'm teaching an elective class at the university this afternoon. You're coming with me. What? George exclaimed. I'm only doing this to help take your mind off things. Otherwise, you'll make yourself sick staying cooped up here. It's settled. What do you mean? It's settled. George's eyes widened. Freya grabbed him and pulled him to his feet. Get up and go wash yourself. You haven't even brushed your teeth, yet you're already eating. George looked completely bewildered. Wait, isn't this a little too? No arguments. Hurry up. Chapter 15. George was in a thoroughly miserable mood when Freya dragged him onto the university campus. He was 32 years old, wearing the white t-shirt and light-wash jeans Freya had forced him to buy that morning, along with a pair of sneakers. She had even pushed him into a chair at a hair salon and made the stylist fuss over his hair for 10 minutes, somehow transforming him into an obedient, well-behaved young man. George said speechlessly, Professor Freya, are you bringing your son to class? Shut up. Freya glanced back at him. I'm 28. And you're 32. How could I possibly be your mother? Fair enough. What mother could look this young? Freya pressed her lips together and ignored him, but the corners of her mouth curved upward slightly. The tiered lecture hall was more than half full. The moment several girls in the front row saw Freya enter, their eyes lit up. Professor Freya looks so beautiful today. Who's that handsome guy beside her? Freya placed her teaching notes on the lectern and glanced across the room. He's my cousin. He just got divorced, so I brought him here to take his mind off things. Wow. George had planned to slip into the back row and hide, but Freya grabbed him and forced him into the center seat of the first row. Sit here and listen carefully. Let the sunlight of knowledge illuminate the darkness in your heart. Professor Freya, are you teaching a class or saving lost souls? Both. Freya smiled, turned around, and opened her presentation. George was forced to sit in the front row, with dozens of eyes staring at him from behind. His back began to prickle. Halfway through the class, Freya began discussing cognitive biases and intimate relationships. Her case study happened to focus on a classic concept, projective identification. What is projective identification? Freya stood at the edge of the platform, holding a laser pointer. It occurs when someone projects a deeply buried thought, emotion, or fear onto another person, then uses a series of behaviors to induce that person to act in accordance with the projection. Eventually, the projection becomes reality, and the person says, "See, I knew it all along." George frowned as he listened. Why did this sound like it was directed at Willow? Let me give you a simple example. Freya's gaze drifted almost imperceptibly across George's face. Someone believes their partner will betray them, so they constantly express suspicion, monitor their whereabouts, and try to control them. Eventually, they drive their partner away. Then they say, "See, I knew you would betray me." George rubbed his nose and leaned back uncomfortably. There is also a more subtle form of projection. Freya's voice became clearer and more animated. A person feels insecure in a relationship but cannot identify the specific reason, so they desperately search for a reasonable explanation to contain their anxiety. For example, my partner worked late and came home after midnight, so they must be cheating. Or, that person never flirts with anyone else, so they must be in love with me. Once that explanation takes root, it provides an enormous sense of certainty. Even if it cannot withstand the slightest scrutiny, the person will cling to it and refuse to let go. Several students beneath the platform nodded thoughtfully. George suddenly remembered Willow's expression when she had confidently declared, "I got his message," that devotion, absolute certainty, and unquestionable determination. It was as though she had seized the only piece of driftwood keeping her afloat. By the time Freya finished class, George had fallen asleep in his chair. The students gradually filed out. Freya gathered her teaching notes and walked to the front row, lowering her gaze toward the sleeping men. Afternoon sunlight streamed diagonally through the high windows of the lecture hall and fell across his profile. His eyelashes cast small shadows beneath his eyes, and his breathing was calm and even. When asleep, this man looked completely different from the sharp-tongued nuisance he usually was. Freya crouched beside him and extended a hand. Her fingers paused in front of the tip of his nose for half a second before she ultimately withdrew them. Instead, she gently tapped George with her teaching notes. "Wake up, class is over." George jolted awake and rubbed his face. "You're finished." "I'm finished. What were you talking about again?" "How you got dumped." "Professor Freya, could we please talk about something else?" "Sure." Freya slung her bag over her shoulder and headed toward the door. "I'll take you to the hot pot restaurant behind the university. The food there is amazing." George followed her out of the lecture hall. The warm autumn sunlight spread across the campus, while fallen leaves swirled in the breeze before drifting back to the ground. Suddenly, he no longer felt quite so empty. Freya was like a brilliant ray of sunshine. Chapter 16. The two of them sat in a hot pot restaurant near the school's back gate. George lowered his head as he cooked a piece of beef tripe, while Freya pushed the luncheon meat around her bowl with her chopsticks. Suddenly, she said, "George, what? Are you feeling better now?" George popped the tripe into his mouth and chewed a couple of times. "Freya, what will it take for you to believe that I'm really fine?" Freya frowned. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Freya lowered her head without another word, poking at the luncheon meat with her chopsticks. George glanced up at her. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the restaurant's glass door and fell upon Freya's lowered lashes, tinting their tips a faint gold. Her lips moved as though she wanted to say something, but she swallowed the words again. "Professor Freya." George set down his chopsticks. "You're about to mash that luncheon meat into a paste." Freya abruptly snapped back to her senses and looked down. Sure enough, she had already prodded the luncheon meat in her bowl to pieces. "I was conducting an academic observation, observing the limits of luncheon meat's elasticity." "George, would you die if you stopped running your mouth?" "So far, the evidence suggests I would." Freya glared at him, then lowered her head and ate the mangled luncheon meat. The tips of her ears turned slightly red. "Professor Freya, what? That research project of yours?" George leaned back in his chair and looked at her. "The one about how long it takes a divorced man to move on. You picked a pretty good test subject." Freya's head snapped up, her eyes wide. Her entire face began burning red from the neck upward. Who said I was using you as a test subject?" She faltered for half a second before stubbornly raising her chin. "I was just worried you might starve to death. Looks to me like you're after my body." Freya completely lost it. She grabbed the chili jar from the table and tried to pour it into George's bowl. "That's what you get for having a smart mouth. Keep talking." Laughing, George blocked her outstretched hand. Their hands brushed over the table, and Freya instantly pulled hers back before lowering her head and focusing on her food. George watched her. Truthfully, even he couldn't quite explain what was happening. When Willow divorced him, he had felt hollow inside, like a house that had been emptied out, leaving nothing but 4 bare walls and dust scattered across the floor. But things didn't seem so bad now. Over the next 2 weeks, Freya came by almost every day. Sometimes she brought food, sometimes fruit, and sometimes she arrived empty-handed, sitting on the couch with a book and chatting with him now and then as she flipped through the pages. At first, George would still ask, "What's your excuse today?" Eventually, he couldn't even be bothered to ask. Freya's excuses were becoming increasingly half-hearted. On the first day, it was, "Willow asked me to check on you." On the second day, it was, "You don't even clean your apartment anymore. This place is disgusting. Get up." On the third day, it was, "I'm graciously giving you the chance to take me out for dinner." By the 5th day, she didn't bother saying anything at all. She rang the doorbell, let herself in, changed into slippers, took an apple from the refrigerator, and sat down on the couch to eat it. When George emerged from his bedroom and saw her, he froze for 3 seconds before asking, "And today you're here because?" "No excuse." Freya took a crisp bite of her apple. "I just wanted to come." George opened his mouth, but no words came out. Freya said, If you have something to say, just say it, Professor Freya. George sat down beside her with a smile. You know, this could easily give someone the wrong idea. The wrong idea about what? That you're pursuing me. Freya's face instantly flushed red, but this time, she didn't look away. She said, then go ahead and keep thinking that. Chapter 17. George froze. After Freya left that night, he sat on the couch and smoked a cigarette. He had to admit that Freya had a very particular way of breaking through people's defenses. She wasn't aggressive in an overt or confrontational way. She was more like water, seeping in silently until, by the time you noticed, she had already filled every corner. He was divorced, and the separation had left a huge void in his heart. By all accounts, he shouldn't have been considering anyone else so soon, but Freya didn't care about any of that. She simply forced her way into that empty space, boldly, unapologetically, and with such confidence that he couldn't even bring himself to reject her. After that day, Freya began visiting even more frequently. The atmosphere between them also subtly changed. Before, whenever she came over, he would ask, "What's your excuse today?" Now, he simply opened the door for her. Before, when she sat on the couch, he would sit across from her. Now, he sat beside her. Their conversations used to be full of barbs, but without either of them noticing. Those sharp edges gradually softened into playful banter. Sometimes George cooked while Freya stood nearby and watched. Sometimes Freya prepared her lessons while George lay on the couch beside her, reading. Sometimes their eyes met, only for both of them to look away. More than once, George felt that time was passing far too quickly. Before he knew it, afternoon had become evening, and in the blink of an eye, it was already late at night. Whenever Freya left, he would stand by the door and watch her put on her shoes. As she bent down to tie her laces, the back of her slender, pale neck was exposed. George suddenly called out, "Freya." She paused. Do you know what you're doing? Freya straightened and looked at him, the corners of her lips slowly lifting. What's wrong? You were so bold with your words before. Are you losing your nerve now? George shook his head. I just don't quite understand. Or rather, I find it hard to believe. George, I've known you for 3 years. You and Willow simply weren't right for each other. But that doesn't mean I'm what? Guess. With a laugh, she pushed open the door and left, leaving George standing alone in the entryway, smiling to himself for a long time. That woman had clearly been playing the long game. Chapter 18. In the blink of an eye, another 2 weeks passed. George's life had completely changed. He and Freya often ate together, watched shows, and played video games. They even traveled and went shopping together. To anyone looking, they were practically a couple. When he had been with Willow, he was like a quiet shadow, taking care of everything yet rarely being noticed. With Freya, he finally seemed to come alive. This woman always found a way to make him laugh, get him talking, and show him that life could be lived like this. More importantly, being with her gave him the easy, carefree feeling that they could stand side by side and take on the world together. Stop staring and play another round, Freya snapped, smacking George. How could this man be such a pervert? George reluctantly dragged his gaze away from her long legs and complained, "You might as well not wear anything. You're deliberately teasing me." Freya's unbelievably long legs were wrapped in tight cropped jeans, perfectly outlining her gorgeous figure. Even a monk wouldn't be able to resist. This woman was definitely doing it on purpose. Freya glared at him. What did you just say? No, that's not what I meant. I meant you shouldn't dress like this at all. You're torturing me. I'm a red-blooded man in my prime. You want to see them? Freya asked. The corner of her lips curled upward, and her eyes were utterly captivating. Her soft voice was like a seductive spring breeze. Yes. George nodded eagerly. Then keep dreaming. Freya burst out laughing. Hurry up and start the game. If you screw up again this time, you can forget about ever seeing them. Don't worry, Professor Freya. For those legs, I'll give it everything I've got. George, a complete gaming noob, instantly perked up. 3 minutes later. George, are your eyes glued to my legs? There are 4 enemies over there, and you charge straight into all of them. I thought I could take all 4 by myself. You're 0 kills and 8 deaths, and you think you can pull off a 1 versus 4? Sit back and stop feeding. Got it. George obediently selected a support character and followed Freya's Jiao-chan around like her personal sidekick. Freya's gameplay was genuinely impressive. Her fingers flew across the screen as Jiao-chan danced through the team fight, dealing massive damage while effortlessly dodging every attack. She scored a quadruple kill in one clash, then pushed straight through and destroyed the enemy nexus. See that? That's what real skill looks like. I saw it. Professor Freya, you're incredible. George gave her a thumbs up. That's about all you're good for. Freya rolled her eyes at him, but the corners of her lips were lifted in a smile. Just then, the doorbell rang. They both looked up at the same time. Freya's eyes lit up. The delivery's here. My barbecue, beer, and crawfish. I'll get it. George tossed his phone onto the couch and shuffled toward the door in his slippers. He pulled it open. Then his entire body went rigid. The person standing outside wasn't a delivery driver. It was Sophia. And she wasn't the same Sophia who normally wore a tailored suit and pencil skirt to the office, looking every inch the icy CEO. Tonight, Sophia was wearing a short black spaghetti strap dress. Its hem ended far above her knees, while the curves below her collarbones were impossible to ignore. Her long chestnut hair spilled over her shoulders, and her makeup was exquisitely seductive. Berry red lipstick coated her lips, glistening faintly beneath the porch light. She wore a pair of slender stilettos and carried an elegant little bag in one hand. Every inch of her radiated one unmistakable message. Tonight, I'm going to have you, boss. Surprise. Sophia's eyes lit up as she flashed him a seductive smile. Bang. George shut the door. He actually shut the door. Chapter 19. Outside the door, Sophia looked utterly baffled. Inside, George pressed his back tightly against the door, his heart rate shooting straight up to 180. Holy shit. Why was she here? Freya was still inside. Who is it? Freya called from the living room. No one. George's voice cracked. Bang, bang, bang. George, open the door. Are you even a man? Sophia shouted from outside. Damn that seductress. No one. Freya asked suspiciously from inside. It's just a delivery guy at the wrong address. George hurriedly opened the door a crack and blocked the gap with his entire body. Lowering his voice, he asked, "Why are you here?" Sophia stood outside with her arms crossed. The smile on her face had already disappeared, and the position of her arms only made her curves look even more striking. Boss, did you seriously just shut the door in my face? George gritted his teeth. I asked why you're here. I came to see you. Sophia blinked and moved half a step closer. You live alone in such a large place. It must get lonely. I brought wine. She shook the bag in her hand, and the bottles clinked crisply against each other. And I brought myself. George felt his temples throbbing. Sophia, listen to me. Right now isn't a good time. Not a good time. Sophia raised an eyebrow. There's no one else inside. So why isn't it a good time? Don't tell me you found some other woman. You're the other woman. You're right, boss. Now hurry up and let the other woman inside. You can't come in. Didn't I tell you not to come over? You're already divorced. So why can't I come? Are you really hiding someone in there? Boss, you can't be this heartless. What am I lacking? George held the door firmly in place as sweat began forming on his forehead. No, Sophia, listen to me. Today really won't work. Another day. I'll take you out to dinner another day. George Wong. Sophia's voice suddenly turned cold. She rarely called him by his full name. At work, she called him boss. In private, she still called him boss, but in a coy, flirtatious tone. Whenever she used his full name, it meant she was serious. Sophia narrowed her eyes. Open the door. I want to see what kind of seductive little vixen you're hiding in there. How could Sophia fail to notice how guilty George looked? Before George could answer, Freya's clear voice came from the living room. George, why are you still standing by the door? Is the barbecue here or not? I'm starving. Oh, and the next round has started. Hurry back. Silence. The entire entryway remained silent for a full 3 seconds. Sophia's expression shifted from shock to disbelief, then from disbelief to fury. Finally, it transformed into a murderous look that practically screamed, "Where's my knife?" Boss. Sophia's voice was sickeningly sweet, so sweet that it sent a chill down his spine. You really do have another woman in there. George closed his eyes. It was over. Everything was over. Sophia shoved George aside and stormed inside, her heels clacking sharply against the floor. Gritting her teeth, she said, "Let me see what kind of goddess she is." Her voice abruptly died. In the living room, Freya sat cross-legged on the couch with her phone in her hand. Looking up at them, the two women's gazes collided in midair. Freya wore a t-shirt and cropped jeans, looking radiant and beautiful. Sophia wore a sexy black spaghetti strap dress and exquisite makeup, with a bag of wine still dangling from her hand. Their eyes locked. The air itself seemed to freeze. Chapter 20. Who are you? Sophia asked coldly as she looked Freya up and down. She hadn't expected to run into such a formidable rival before she could even make her move. The woman on the couch was clearly no ordinary interloper. Her face and figure were every bit as striking as Sophia's, and even her poise was exceptional. Still, that didn't give her the right to steal Sophia's man. Dressed so casually and making herself completely at home in her boss's house, this was absolutely intolerable. Sophia's gaze sharpened into a pair of blades aimed directly at Freya. You'd better say you're his cousin. That way, everyone can save face, and I might be willing to understand. Otherwise, someone might bleed tonight. Smiling, Freya rose from the couch and stood barefoot on the rug. And who are you? Sophia was assessing Freya, but Freya was scrutinizing Sophia just as closely. A woman had shown up late at night dressed like that. If Freya hadn't spent the entire afternoon with George, she might have assumed that the bastard had gotten lonely and hired some nightclub hostess. She had to admit, though, the woman's face, figure, and presence were all top tier. More importantly, she was bold enough to dress like this and apparently had no shame whatsoever. As a psychology professor, Freya knew how to read people. This woman had clearly come looking for trouble. Freya sneered. "You're rather strange. You barged into my home, yet you're asking who I am." "Your home?" Sophia scoffed. How shameless could this woman be? Freya nodded. "Of course, George is my boyfriend, and we're practically discussing marriage. His home is my home. Is there a problem?" Freya held her head high, her gaze as sharp as an arrow. Sophia sneered. "What a joke. Since when was he your boyfriend? Why didn't I know about it?" "You're an outsider. Of course you wouldn't know." "George." Both women called his name almost simultaneously. When they turned around, they saw that shameless bastard standing behind them with his arms crossed, enjoying the show. "Ladies, go ahead and fight. Better yet, have a real catfight and see who tears the other one's clothes off first. That's my favorite kind." "Pervert," Freya hissed through gritted teeth. That bastard wasn't even taking her side. "I don't mind." Sophia suddenly smiled. She turned around and wrapped both arms around George's arm. "I'm just afraid she won't dare. Besides, her figure is only average." Who was Sophia? She was the president of Stellar Investment. Her experience and skill in dealing with people were naturally far beyond those of an academic like Freya. "Average?" Freya's eyes widened. "Which part of me looks average to you?" She immediately fired back. "You're certainly impressive. Why didn't you just come naked?" "I was worried you might get jealous." "That's enough," George interrupted irritably. "You don't even know each other's names, and you're already at each other's throats. Let me introduce you. This is Sophia." George pulled his arm free from Sophia's embrace. "And that is Freya. Now sit down so we can talk." Freya froze. "Sophia. What? Have you heard of me?" Sophia replied irritably. Then she gave George an awkward smile. Damn, it looked like they wouldn't be able to keep the secret much longer. Freya stood there in a daze as someone suddenly came to mind. That was right, she had seen this woman on Willow's phone. Her eyes widened in shock. "You're Sophia, the president of Stellar Investment." Although Sophia's current appearance couldn't have been further removed from her professional image, her facial features and distinctive presence still allowed Freya to recognize her. "A pleasure to meet you, Miss Freya." Sophia extended her hand. "Wait a minute." Freya no longer cared about competing with Sophia because her brain had completely crashed. Why would the president of Stellar Investment visit an ordinary house husband in the middle of the night? More importantly, why did this house husband have exactly the same name as George Wong, the powerful owner of Stellar Investment? Chapter 21. That joke George had once made, "I'm the owner of Stellar," suddenly came rushing back to Freya. Dear God, Freya almost wished the realization would knock her unconscious. How could this possibly be true? "You're the owner of Stellar?" Freya finally pieced together all the questions in her mind and stared at George in shock. No wonder he had always been so composed. No wonder he could pour 3 billion into Anshin Bio over 3 years. Everything that had once seemed inexplicable suddenly made perfect sense. George sat down on the couch and said calmly, "I told you ages ago. Why are you making such a fuss?" He looked at the two women still standing there. "Are you two planning to stand guard all night?" Sophia immediately seized the opportunity. "If that's what you need, boss, I wouldn't mind." George glared at her irritably. Sophia instantly put on an aggrieved expression. The icy, sophisticated executive even pouted, her eyes glistening as though she might burst into tears. "You secretly kept another woman hidden away, yet you think you're in the right?" Freya finally recovered from her shock. She looked at the men sitting cross-legged on the couch, wearing an expression that practically said, "What the hell does this have to do with me?" Scenes from the past 3 years flashed through her mind like a movie. His back as he expertly tossed food in a wok, the dismissive expression he wore whenever Willow criticized him, as though saying, "Fine, fine, whatever you say." The lonely figure he cut while standing against the light outside the Civil Affairs office, and the joke he had repeated more than once. "Did it ever occur to you that I might be that George?" Freya took a deep breath and slowly walked over to the couch. Looking down at him, she said, "So, Willow divorced you because of you?" "Yeah." She cried and apologized to you, then said she was going to pursue the George who had invested 3 billion in her company, but that George was you. "Yeah." "And then you signed the divorce papers and let her go pursue you?" "Yeah." Freya fell silent for 3 seconds. Then she snatched a cushion from the couch and smashed it straight into George's face. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" The cushion struck him squarely before bouncing away, revealing his utterly baffled face. "Wait, why are you hitting me?" Sophia caught the cushion and immediately hurled it back. "You crazy woman." Freya was left stunned by the blow. Once she recovered, she grabbed the vase from the table. "Enough. George barked. What are you two doing? Starting a rebellion? Put that down. The living room instantly fell silent. Sophia curled her lips smugly. I'm the boss's favorite. Go on, throw it if you dare. Freya, meanwhile, stared at George in disbelief. You're protecting her? Have I spent all these days looking after a damn dog? Her beautiful eyes filled with tears as she looked at him, yet neither woman dared say another word. Perhaps it was because they now knew how wealthy he was, or perhaps there was some other reason. Either way, the aura this man exuded right now was completely different from that of the ordinary house husband they knew. Freya asked softly, so you and Willow really are divorced? Given the situation, Freya seriously suspected that George and Willow might get back together. If that happened, she would look like a complete fool. You personally accompanied us there, George replied. How could the divorce possibly be fake? But why did you divorce her? George looked speechless. She cheated on me. Cheated on you, but the other man was still you. He wasn't me. He was another person Willow had imagined in her mind. That person merely happened to share my name. It's like a married woman secretly falling for some guy online behind her husband's back. Do you understand now, Professor Freya? You're a psychology expert. This shouldn't be so difficult for you to grasp. Chapter 22. Freya snorted softly. Who said I hadn't figured it out? I'm angry because you deceived everyone. Why couldn't you just explain everything properly? I was naive back then, George replied. I always thought I wanted a pure relationship without anything else complicating it. I may not have told her the truth, but I never mistreated her, did I? Sophia immediately agreed. Our boss was deeply devoted to her. Unfortunately, Willow didn't appreciate him and even invented another man in her imagination. It's utterly ridiculous. So, Miss Kim, did you come here tonight intending to swoop in while he was vulnerable? Of course. Sophia Kim admitted it without hesitation. She crossed her legs, causing her short skirt to ride a little higher. Boss is single, and I'm single. Is it illegal for me to pursue him? Whether it's illegal is debatable. Freya walked over to George, wrapped her arms around his, and declared, but he's my boyfriend now. In your dreams. George hurriedly raised a hand. Professor Freya, you can't make things up. I haven't even gotten a proper look at your legs yet. How did I become your boyfriend? You've already touched them, and you're still denying it. When did I touch them? Sophia immediately cut in. Boss, you can touch mine. They feel amazing. As she spoke, Sophia placed one of her legs across George's lap. Freya exploded. You shameless woman, get off him. Why should I? The doorbell rang again. All right, that's enough. The delivery really is here this time. Since Sophia is already here, the three of us can eat together. Great, Sophia exclaimed with a love-struck expression. What's so great about it? The food isn't for you. That's not your decision. George went to open the door on his own. He had no idea how to handle a fight between these two temptresses, so he decided to stay out of it and let them fight all they wanted. I'm coming. George opened the door. Willow. He froze. Chapter 23. The instant the door opened, George froze. Willow stood outside in a cream-colored business suit, carrying a briefcase. Her face still bore the exhaustion of working late. Willow, why are you here? George remained wedged in the doorway, his smile so stiff it looked as though someone had glued it onto his face. I just got off work. I happened to be passing by, so I thought I'd come and see you. What else could she say? Could she tell him that she had worked until 10 and, while driving home, inexplicably turned onto the road she had traveled countless times over the past 3 years? Could she tell him that when she saw the light still on in his window, she could no longer bring herself to drive away? Could she tell him that she had buried herself in work for the past 2 weeks, believing she wouldn't think about him if she kept busy, only to return to an empty apartment every night without even one person to talk to? Her stomach had hurt terribly when she finished work that evening. She had crouched in the office break room and dry-heaved for a long time, bringing up nothing but coffee. Then she had sat on the floor, leaning against a cabinet, and suddenly burst into tears. She remembered how, whenever her stomach hurt before their divorce, George would get up in the middle of the night and make plain congee for her. He would top it with a soft-centered egg, bring it to her bedside, and stir it with a spoon until it had cooled before handing it to her. Willow pressed her lips together. I just wanted to talk to you, only for a little while. Is that okay? Willow, we're already divorced. I know. Willow abruptly raised her head, her eyes bright red. I know we're divorced. I just wanted someone to talk to. You have no idea what these past 2 weeks have been like. At that moment, the voices of 2 women rang clearly from the living room. Let go of him. Boss is mine. You let go. Have you no shame? He's already touched my legs. George had never wanted to die more in his entire life. Willow frowned, and her expression instantly changed. She craned her neck to look inside. There's someone in your apartment. Before she had even finished speaking, Freya appeared in the entryway, with Sophia peering out from behind her. All 6 eyes met. The air abruptly fell silent. The three women's gazes collided beneath the entryway light. Willow stared at Freya, her best friend. Freya was wearing a loose t-shirt and cropped jeans, standing barefoot in George's entryway. Her expression shifted from confusion to stiffness, then to a kind of panic Willow had never seen on her face before. Willow's gaze moved past Freya and landed on Sophia behind her. A short black spaghetti-strap dress, exquisite makeup, bare feet on the rug, and a half-smoked cigarette still held between her fingers. Was this really the icy CEO Kim from the negotiating table? Was this really the president of Stellar Investment, who had always appeared poised and dignified whenever they met? The three women stared at one another. It felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room, and with that single glance, something inside Willow finally snapped. The president of Stellar Investment had come to visit an ordinary house husband in the middle of the night. That house husband happened to share the exact same name as the owner of Stellar Holdings. Then there were all the jokes George had made countless times. "I'm George from Stellar Holdings," the $1 billion that had always arrived whenever her company was on the brink of collapse. Sophia's respect for him, which had gone far beyond anything commercially reasonable. The mysterious man who had never met her, never allowed himself to be photographed, yet had supported her without pause for 3 whole years. Every coincidence she had attributed to love, every detail she had imagined as proof that she was special to him. At that moment, they all collapsed like a row of dominoes. Chapter 24. George. Willow's voice trembled, though she might not have realized it herself. "Tell me." George leaned against the doorframe and looked at her. "Are you really George Wong, the owner of Stellar Holdings?" George nodded. "Didn't I tell you that a long time ago?" The living room remained silent for about 5 seconds. Then Willow suddenly laughed. It was a faint sound, squeezed from the back of her throat. It wasn't a happy laugh or a mocking one. It was the laugh of a woman realizing that she was the biggest fucking idiot in the world. As she continued laughing, her expression began to crumble. She wasn't crying. It was the collapse of 30 years of pride and confidence, crushed into dust by the truth within a matter of seconds and now seeping from the very marrow of her bones. George closed his eyes briefly. "Come inside." He stepped aside. "Since everyone is here, we might as well clear everything up at once." Willow slowly followed him inside. She placed her high heels on the floor and changed into slippers one at a time. Her movements were painfully slow, as though she were trying to buy herself time. She had to remain calm. Once she had finished, she raised her head. "Freya." Her voice was unexpectedly calm. "You're my best friend. Why are you here in the middle of the night?" "Willow." Freya wished the ground would open and swallow her. Willow nodded. She wasn't truly an idiot. It turned out that her best friend had never been joking. Freya really had intended to steal her husband. Willow was the only one who had been too foolish to see it. They all moved into the living room. Sophia casually sat down beside George, looking every inch the lady of the house. She crossed her legs, causing the hem of her short dress to ride even higher. Freya had planned to sit off to the side, but when she saw that seductress practically pressing herself against that shameless man, she could no longer remain calm. She defiantly sat down on his other side, as if I'd lose to some nightclub girl. Sitting across from them, Willow felt as though she had fallen into an abyss. "Sophia." She looked at Sophia first, and some of the coldness she displayed during business negotiations returned to her voice. She enunciated each word carefully. "My husband really is your boss." Sophia set down her wineglass and erased the faint smile from her lips. "Correction, your ex-husband. And yes, he is the owner of Stellar. No question about it. When did this happen? Was he the owner from the very beginning?" Sophia nodded. "From the very beginning. I started working for him right after graduating from college. He had already stepped back from the company before he met you. A professional management team handles its daily operations, but he remains the owner." As Willow listened, the color gradually drained from her face. George continued. "The first time I told you 3 years ago, you laughed and said I was delusional. I told you again several times afterward, but you always treated it as a joke. You never believed me once." Willow frowned. "But you never what? Slapped a black card down in front of you, drove a Rolls-Royce to pick you up outside your company." George smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Willow, let me ask you something. During the past 3 years, did I ever let you suffer?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "This apartment has always belonged to me. I never spent a cent of your money. It's all still in the account. You simply assumed I came from a reasonably wealthy family but had no ambition. If you had paid even a little attention, it wouldn't have been difficult to figure out. The reason I never seriously explained or tried to prove my identity was that I once believed who I was mattered more than my status. But clearly, I was wrong. The love I thought we had never existed." His voice remained calm throughout, as though he were talking about someone else's life. "That's not true." Willow finally broke down, tears pouring from her eyes. "Honey, I never imagined it was really you." She practically lunged forward, trying to take her husband's hand. Her composure and dignity no longer mattered. She felt as though fate had played a cruel joke on her, but if it was only a joke, then they could put it behind them. Once they did, they would still be husband and wife. He had always adored her. He would forgive her. George moved away. Willow grasped nothing but air. Her hands remained outstretched as she froze in place. Chapter 25. We're divorced. George said. That was because you cheated on me. George interrupted. Your heart cheated on me. He paused. With another George. But that man was you. Willow finally lost control of her voice. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I did. But that isn't what matters. George interrupted. To you, we were two different men, and you abandoned me for him. And Willow, let me ask you this, if George from Stellar Holdings really had been another man, where would you be tonight? Willow opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. You'd be in his bed. George answered for her. You'd be ecstatic, believing he was the powerful man you could rely on, the man you should have married. You wouldn't feel guilty about betraying me, because from beginning to end, you saw me as nothing more than an insignificant shrub standing in the way of your success. Willow stood there as tears streamed down her face, as though every tear she had accumulated throughout her life had been saved for this moment. You only regretted your decision after learning the truth, George said calmly. No, honey, I truly know I was wrong. With a thud, Willow dropped to her knees on the rug. She could no longer think clearly. All the love and devotion her husband had given her over the past 3 years came flooding back, and only now did she realize what she had lost. She had to win him back. It wasn't only because of his identity, but also because of the love they had shared. Willow knelt on the rug, her entire body trembling as she wept. The living room remained silent for about 10 seconds. No one moved or spoke. Only Willow's sobs repeatedly broke the silence. Freya instinctively reached out to help her, but forcibly stopped herself. She was a psychology professor. She understood the situation far too well. Whoever intervened now would get burned. Sophia, meanwhile, remained completely unruffled. She gently swirled the wine in her glass, a faint smile playing on her lips as she thoroughly enjoyed the show. Honey, Willow dug her fingers into the rug, her nails buried in its fibers and her knuckles turning white. I know I was wrong. I really do. Please give me one chance, just one. We can start over. I don't want anything else. I don't want the company or the money. I only want to live a good life with you. Get up, George said. I won't. Willow abruptly raised her head. Her tears had washed her mascara into 2 black streaks. I won't get up unless you forgive me. George, we were husband and wife for 3 years. You can't simply throw me away. You loved me so much before. Have you forgotten? You were the one who gave us up, George said. His voice remained flat, as though he were reading the weather forecast. I didn't know. Willow's voice became shrill with the hysteria of someone who had been backed into a corner. I didn't know that man was you. I thought George from Stellar was someone else. I thought he was waiting for me. I thought I owed him. How could I have known you were the same person? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you tell me? She practically screamed the final sentence. George didn't move. He merely stood there, looking down at her. Willow, he said, that still means I was the man you abandoned, doesn't it? Willow remained on her knees, her shoulders shaking violently. George crouched until they were at eye level. So now you know, the man you emotionally cheated with was me. From beginning to end, there was only ever one man. But do you know where the problem lies? Willow. She raised her eyes. They were so red they looked ready to bleed. In your mind, we were two different people. One was the pathetic loser cooking for you in the kitchen. The other was a powerful tycoon at the very top, capable of moving mountains with a word. You chose the latter and discarded the former. Now you've discovered that those two men were actually the same person, and suddenly, you regret everything. Willow parted her lips, but nothing came out. You don't regret hurting me, George continued. You regret misjudging my value. Willow's face instantly turned deathly pale. Those words were like a knife, piercing straight through every respectable facade she had used to disguise the truth. She couldn't answer because he was right. As she knelt there crying, was she mourning the loss of a loving husband, or the fact that she had disastrously misjudged a severely undervalued asset? Even she could no longer tell. Chapter 26. George burst out laughing. Do you still remember that letter you wrote? Your kindness has flowed over me like mighty rivers, vast and unending. Even had Willow's heart been carved from unyielding stone, it would long since have melted into a tenderness supple enough to wind around your finger. Many a time have I lamented the cruel mistake fate led me to make in this mortal world. Stop it, Willow shrieked, clapping her hands over her ears. Those words, once written with such heartfelt sincerity, had now become bloodless blades, each one stabbing straight into her heart. She wanted nothing more than to crawl into a crack in the ground and disappear. In all her life, Willow had never embarrassed herself this badly. Sophia was also laughing uncontrollably. Why should he stop? It's so beautifully written. Gazing upon her reflection, Willow has spent countless nights without sleep. At last, I have resolved to sever the ill-fated bond of my past and honor the vow that binds us across 3 lifetimes. Please, stop. Willow was trembling all over. How she wished she could go deaf at that very moment. Sophia couldn't have cared less. She continued reciting with theatrical cadence. Willow knows well that her beauty is as frail as the willow and that her body, already sullied, is unworthy of standing beside you. I ask only that we meet, so I may lay bare my heart before you. I long to remain at your side by day and night, to share your burdens and bring solace to your heart. Should I be blessed with your tenderness, no greater joy could be mine. Willow sank to the floor in utter despair. Even Freya's eyes widened. She had never imagined that Willow had written such a letter. Who could possibly forgive something like this? What had she treated her ex-husband as? Willow remained on her knees, her lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. Sophia set down her wineglass and stood. CEO Lou, as your ex-husband's subordinate, I normally shouldn't interfere. She walked over to Willow in her 4-inch stilettos and looked down at the woman kneeling on the floor. But as a human being, I genuinely cannot understand you. Willow didn't raise her head. Sophia lightly patted her cheek. You keep saying you wronged him. Yet every sentence you've spoken since entering this apartment has been, why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you explain? And do you have any idea how much I suffered? Sophia crouched until they were at eye level. You've said so much, but did you ever ask him even once whether he was hurting? Willow's eyelashes trembled. 3 years. He cooked for you for 3 years. When you worked overtime, he brought you late-night meals. When your stomach hurt, he got up in the middle of the night to make you congee. When you lost your temper, he never argued back. You thought he was pathetic, but the truth was that he was simply loving someone with all his heart. Sophia's voice was soft, as though she were telling a story that had nothing to do with anyone in the room. And what did you give him? Without waiting for Willow to answer, Sophia continued. You gave him a divorce certificate, and your reason was that you had fallen in love with a richer, more mysterious version of him, one you believed was more worthy of you. Sophia stood, brushed non-existent dust from her dress, and returned to the couch to pick up her bag. Boss, I'm leaving. There's too much drama here tonight, and I still have work tomorrow. Professor Freya, I'll concede tonight to you. Make the most of it. Shameless. Freya snapped irritably. What kind of woman do you think I am? Sophia smiled and walked toward the entryway. Before leaving, she glanced back at Willow. Miss Lou, my boss is soft-hearted, so Stellar won't withdraw its $1 billion Series C investment. But let me offer you a friendly warning. Cherish the stage while you can still measure your dignity by your company's valuation. Someday, when you suddenly realize in the middle of the night that the congee he made for you was worth more than $3 billion, that's when the pain will truly begin. The door closed. The sound of Sophia's heels gradually faded down the corridor. Chapter 27. Only 3 people remained in the living room. George stood, Freya sat, and Willow knelt. Their positions resembled a meticulously composed oil painting, its frame filled with the weight of 3 years and the wreckage of the past 2 weeks. Freya rose from the couch. Barefoot, she walked over to Willow one step at a time. Willow, she began, her voice slightly hoarse. You asked me why I was here. Willow slowly raised her head and looked at the woman who had once been her best friend. I'll answer you. Freya crouched until they were face to face. 3 years ago, when you first brought him to meet me, I thought he was a wonderful man. Willow's gaze sharpened like a blade, but I didn't do anything. For 3 years, I watched you look down on him, brush him aside, and take everything he did for granted. I watched him cook for you in the kitchen while you sat on the couch without even looking up. Freya's voice remained calm, but every word pierced Willow like a needle. I study psychology. Do you know why I never pointed any of this out? Willow didn't answer. Freya took a deep breath. Because I was waiting for the day you would recognize how good he was on your own. But you never did. Not even at the very end. So you were waiting for me to divorce him. Willow shrieked. Freya, you're fucking devious. You're wrong. Freya stood. I wasn't waiting for you to divorce him. You chose to do that yourself. You threw away a living, breathing man for someone you had never even met. That day outside the civil affairs office, I looked back at him. He was standing on the steps against the light. People were coming and going all around him, but he just stood there alone. Freya paused. At that moment, I made my decision. The men you didn't want, I wanted. Willow staggered to her feet. Her knees were so weak that she nearly fell and had to brace herself against the arm of the couch. She stared at Freya for 3 seconds. Then she laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh or a mocking one. It was the kind of laugh that seemed to seep from the cracks in her bones. As she laughed, tears began streaming down her face again. Freya, I misjudged one man in this life, and I also misjudged one woman. She bent down and haphazardly stuffed her belongings into her bag. Then she pulled out a tissue and wiped her face, only to smear her makeup even more. Giving up, she threw the entire packet of tissues onto the floor. Fine, you win. I wish you both happiness. She walked to the door, then stopped. George. She didn't turn around. Her voice suddenly became eerily calm. I'm sorry, Willow, George suddenly said. Willow stopped, her back going rigid. Take care of yourself from now on. Work hard and live a good life. Willow didn't turn around. Her shoulders trembled once, and then she straightened her back until it was perfectly upright. Thank you. The door closed. I should go after her, Freya said distractedly. After all, they had been best friends for many years. Do you think she wants to see you right now? But what if Willow does something reckless? George took a cigarette from the coffee table and lit it. She's Willow. She grew Anshin Bio from 5 billion to 20 billion. She isn't going to do anything reckless. Freya raised her head and looked at him. Then what about me? What am I in your eyes? Your rebound? The best friend who swooped in while she was vulnerable? Or just a pawn you're using to make her jealous? George froze. You don't need to explain yet. Let me finish. Freya's eyes glistened. I said those things in front of her tonight, and I don't regret them. I've wanted you since 3 years ago. I waited until today, and I don't believe I did anything wrong. She paused. But George, when Willow was kneeling on that rug and crying, I'll be honest, it hurt to watch. No matter how foolish, arrogant, or deserving of this she was still my friend for 10 years. I'm not the sentimental type, but I need to make one thing clear to you face to face. She extended her hand and pressed her index finger against his chest. From this moment on, I refuse to be anyone's substitute. I'm not a tool for healing your broken heart, a prop for making Willow jealous, or a temporary stop on your way to another relationship. If what? George asked, looking at her with amusement. If you still have feelings for her, even the slightest bit, tell me now. George reached out, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her. MMPH. Startled, Freya pounded against his chest. You still haven't explained yourself. What's there to explain? Kiss me. Chapter 28. A year and a half later. In the kitchen of the most luxurious hillside villa in South City, the range had hummed steadily. 6 or 7 dishes were arranged beside the stove. The sweet and sour ribs had just come out of the wok, while chicken soup bubbled in a clay pot, sending clouds of steam into the air. The television could be heard from the living room. Anshin Bio has officially completed its Series D financing round, pushing its valuation past 20 billion. Founder Willow stated that the company plans to file for an IPO next year. George, Willow's on the news again. Freya was curled up on the couch. Her round belly stretched the front of her light gray maternity dress, and one hand gently caressed it. George poked his head out of the kitchen, glanced at the television, and said, "Oh." Then he turned around and continued cooking. Freya complained, "That's it. Your ex-wife is worth 20 billion now, and all you have to say is, oh. What else should I do? Set off some firecrackers?" The lock clicked. Sophia kicked off her heels and tossed her bag onto the shoe cabinet. "I'm home. Could you two please stop flaunting your love every time I walk through the door?" She entered the living room, draped her coat over the couch, and glanced back toward the entryway. Her voice suddenly became slightly awkward. I brought someone home today." Freya frowned. Then a voice came from the entryway. "It's me." Willow stepped into view. She wore a beige coat over a white blouse, and her hair was slightly longer than it had been a year and a half ago. She had lost a noticeable amount of weight, but her eyes had changed. They were no longer sharp and scrutinizing. Instead, they looked calm, grounded, and free of the constant need to compete or prove herself. She looked at Freya and George, then smiled. "I came without an invitation. I hope you don't mind." The living room remained silent for about 3 seconds. Freya supported her lower back as she stood and looked Willow up and down. "You've lost so much weight, have I?" Willow glanced at Freya's belly. "How far along are you?" 6 months. Willow nodded, then looked at George. He stood in the kitchen doorway with oil stains on his apron and a spatula in his hand. Their eyes met. Willow smiled faintly. "Chef George, what delicious food are you making tonight?" George looked at her for 2 seconds before smiling as well. "Sweet and sour ribs, steamed sea bass, and chicken soup." He turned and headed back into the kitchen. "You used to like broccoli with garlic. We happen to have some." Willow froze. Freya gave her a tug. "Why are you standing there? Go wash your hands. Dinner's almost ready." 5 minutes later, the 4 of them sat around the dining table. There were 6 dishes and 1 soup, with a clay pot of steaming chicken soup in the center. George sat at the head of the table, with Freya on his right, Sophia on his left, and Willow across from him. Freya tasted the soup. "What did you put in this?" "Chinese yam and lotus seeds. They're good for pregnant women." Sophia held out her empty bowl. "What about mine?" "You're not pregnant." Sophia pouted. "And whose fault is that?" "Eat your dinner. That should keep your mouth occupied." Willow held her bowl and laughed. "Are you 3 like this every day?" "More or less." Freya picked up a rib. "He cooks, I criticize, and Sophia stirs up trouble. We each have a clearly defined role." George lowered his head and continued eating without saying anything. Willow glanced at him before taking a mouthful of rice. It was perfectly cooked, not too soft and not too firm. It tasted exactly as she remembered. Whenever George cooked, the rice always had the same texture. She had never paid attention to details like that before. Now, every grain seemed to remind her of what she had once possessed, and what she had thrown away with her own hands. Willow set down her chopsticks. "There's something I want to say to you in person." Her voice was calm. "I'm not saying it because I want you to forgive me or take me back. I simply want to apologize." Chapter 29. The banter around the dining table stopped. Willow said, "I used to think you were merely an ordinary man who spent all his time in the kitchen, someone unworthy of me. Later, I discovered that the man I admired had been you all along. But then I made another mistake. I thought regret was enough to win you back. That night, when I knelt in your home and cried, it looked as though I was apologizing, but I was actually trying to bargain with you. It took me a year and a half to learn what a genuine apology is." She looked at George and spoke each word carefully. "George, I'm sorry. For 3 years, you made soy milk for me every morning, and I never once told you it tasted good. Whenever you got up in the middle of the night to make me plain congee, I never once thanked you. Those weren't debts that could be repaid with money. They were debts of the heart. Over the past year and a half, I finally understood why you made those choices and why you were willing to put everything aside to cook for me. But I understood too late." Who was Willow now? She was a beautiful CEO at the height of her success. Yet she couldn't stop asking herself what she truly was in other people's eyes. Perhaps she had everything, beauty and wealth, but perhaps she had nothing at all. She finally understood the icy loneliness inside her and her longing for a simple, genuine love. But she would never find that love again. "So my apology today comes with no conditions. I'm not asking you to forgive me or take me back. I simply believe that I owe you this." Silence settled over the dining table for several seconds. George put down his chopsticks and looked at Willow. Her eyes were red, but she didn't cry. Her shoulders remained straight. She sat there like a tree that had finally stopped clinging to anything else and grown roots of its own. George nodded. "Before, every word you said was shaped by how you imagined other people saw you, but what you just said came from you." Willow froze briefly. Then she smiled. It was a genuine, relaxed smile, the smile of someone who had finally let go. "I accept your apology," George said. "That doesn't mean I forgive you. It only means I accept it. Forgiveness is something you give to people you still care about. As far as I'm concerned, our story is already over." Willow raised her glass of orange juice and clinked it against his wineglass. The sound was crisp and brief. "That's good. You have to finish one chapter before you can begin another." Sophia picked up her chopsticks and tapped the rim of her bowl. "All right, enough sentimentality. Willow, try these ribs. They're 100 times better than anything in Anshin Bio's cafeteria." Willow picked up a rib and took a bite. Her eyes immediately brightened. "They still taste the same." "The same as what?" "They taste like his cooking." Willow chewed the rib, her voice calm, as though she were speaking of something from the distant past, something that could no longer hurt her. "After the divorce, I hired several housekeepers, but none of them could recreate this flavor. Eventually, I realized the problem wasn't their cooking. What was missing? The person. When the person cooking is different, the food can never taste the same." George filled a bowl with chicken soup and placed it in front of Willow. "If you ever want to eat my cooking again, just let us know in advance." Willow looked at the bowl. Warm steam rose against her face. She lifted it and took a sip. "It's delicious." Outside, the sky gradually darkened. The city lights came on one by one. The plate of sweet and sour ribs was already empty. Only a perfectly intact skeleton remained of the steamed sea base, and more than half the chicken soup was gone. Freya leaned back in her chair, rubbing her belly and complaining that she had eaten too much. Sophia told Willow gossip about an absurd project at work. Willow listened attentively, occasionally adding a comment of her own. Then the two women turned their attention to the baby in Freya's belly. George went into the kitchen to cut some fruit and returned with a plate of cantaloupe and watermelon. "Come feel the baby. We've saved the godmother spot for you." Chapter 30. Willow rested her hand on Freya's round belly and felt the tiny life moving inside. Once, twice, like a little fish blowing bubbles. Her eyes instantly turned red. It moved. "Yeah, the baby always gets especially active after I eat." Willow withdrew her hand from Freya's belly and curled her fingers into her palm, as though holding a tiny piece of warm candy. She lowered her head and smiled. When she looked up again, her eyes were still red, but the corners of her lips were curved upward. "All right, I'll be the godmother." She raised her glass of orange juice toward the other three. "I'll be coming over for free meals all the time from now on," Sophia teased. "Planning to freeload on anything else?" "Sophia, how can you?" Freya rolled her eyes at Sophia. "Don't listen to her. She's a complete seductress." She couldn't stand by any longer and immediately came to her best friend's defense. Sophia chuckled. "And who exactly is the seductress? With the noises someone makes, you'd think she was trying to bring the roof down." "Sophia, you're horrible." Freya's face turned scarlet as she stood, ready to settle the score with that shameless woman. Hey, be careful, Sophia exclaimed in alarm. I'll come over to you and let you vent. Okay, just don't move around. George remained seated across from them, leisurely sipping his tea. The lights cast a warm amber glow over the room. The plates and bowls were half empty, while the cantaloupe on the fruit platter still carried a sweet, refreshing chill. Laughter from a variety show drifted intermittently from the television as the city lights beyond the window illuminated the night one by one. Freya curled up on the couch and placed her long legs directly across George's lap. Is it finally time for my reward? George asked in surprise. You're annoying too. Massage them. That still counts as a reward. George's massage technique was remarkably skillful. Unfortunately, he kept pushing his luck and testing the limits, making Freya want to kick the shameless man to death. Sophia laughed beside them. Willow lowered her head. Outside the window, the night was in no hurry.